I was the first boy in my high school, at least to my knowledge, to start identifying as transgender. Between the time I left after 10th grade and the time my class graduated, 1/6 of the boys in my grade identified as transgender, and a similar proportion continued in the grades below me. You walk down a hallway in Berklee College of Music and you see posters about, oh, we have a trans support group, and these are directions on how to get gender-affirming care. And all of this just complete bullshit that's encouraging students to harm themselves. It's everywhere. You can't run from it. I had a lot of social difficulties growing up. I didn't know it at the time, and my parents didn't know it at the time, but I was autistic. Generally speaking, I was a very happy-go-lucky kid, very extroverted. Things changed a lot when I went to kindergarten and first grade, because this was the first time in my life where I really experienced physical abuse in any sense. There were a number of days where I would come back home bloody, torn shirts, torn shorts, all that. And that basically led to me to really close up. I became very anxious. I became very depressed. When I went to 7th and 8th grade, I continued to have a lot of social difficulties. I wasn't bullied physically, but I was called the F slur on a near daily basis because I looked gay, whatever that means. Fall of 9th grade, I very quickly gained a friend group for the first time in my life who happened to all be girls. Now, one day I came into school and none of them talked to me. And I genuinely didn't know why they all of a sudden stopped talking to me. The next event was about a week or two later. I was on a school trip to see a play. I believe the play was Fun Home. It's a musical. And during this field trip, I was sexually assaulted by an older boy who was, I think, 17 or 18 at the time, junior, senior. And so my social support network had disappeared. I'm disconnected from my body. I'm still trying to deal with all of the basically trauma of being the target of homophobic bullying for 2 years straight in middle school. So I joined what was then called the Gay Straight Alliance, because I'm like, these people will probably get what I've gone through and maybe I can talk about it. And instead of talking about homophobia or being gay is cool and okay, instead of that, we would regularly watch videos by this transgender YouTuber called ContraPoints, who is male to female. And this is where I learned about the concept of gender dysphoria and transition and all of these concrete steps. And also that year in health class, we learned about the gender unicorn, and we were asked to kind of place ourselves on that. I did my Googling because I was distressed, and that's what any kid does in my generation. And it's like, I get along better with girls than with boys. And all these symptoms on Google basically, in 2019 at least, 2018 rather, all lead you towards the answer of trans. And when you look at these self-help resources and these videos by these transgender YouTubers, those same grievances are replicated in their words. And they say that transitioning fixed all of that for them. So as a kid, when I was 14, I saw that and I said, well, they had the same problems I did pretty much. They took this step, or these series of steps. Why wouldn't that work for me? I started seeing a therapist at Boston Children's because I had basically a mental breakdown. So I was having flashbacks, I was having nightmares, and eventually, I think sometime in the spring, I come out to my therapist at Boston Children's and I'm like, I'm really a girl. I think I'm trans. And she immediately affirms me. She says, oh my God, you're so brave. These are the things you can do. She gave me a referral to the gender clinic. And that summer, at summer camp, I started experimenting with pronouns. Then I noticed that people treat me a lot better if I say my pronouns are they, them. And so I take that as evidence that, oh, I must really be not a man, that I was really meant to be a girl, that I was actually born in the wrong body in some real sense. And through 10th grade, I persist with this identity, but I don't really socially transition or take very many steps. I come out to a number of friends, all of whom affirm me, of course. And then I socially transitioned in my first year of college. I wanted to medically transition for years. I didn't like the effects of puberty. I didn't like my body hair. I didn't like my facial hair. I didn't like the fact that my voice changed. I didn't like the way that people saw me as a man. I was depressed. I was anxious. I was uncomfortable with my sexuality. All of these different things. And all of the medical professionals I saw, except when I moved to a new therapist, were explicitly affirming when I brought the subject up with them. Whenever I brought it up with a teacher or a professor, they were also affirming and caved into my requests. I talked about the prospects of going on hormones with my therapist, with my psychopharmacologist, with my pediatrician, and there was never a discussion of negative effects or anything, only affirmation, only pushing me towards it. I didn't have any adults besides my parents who were neutral and pushed back on this to any degree whatsoever when I talked to them about it. And I was really convinced, not because of my own reasoning, but rather the influence of doctors and activists in the broader culture, that either I was going to medically transition or I was going to kill myself. This transition or die narrative, this dead son, living daughter narrative, I really internalized that, because when your pediatrician says it, and your pediatrician for your whole life, you've built up this relationship, there's a level of trust in that relationship that I had. When he asked my dad, would you like a dead son or a living daughter? I believed him. I hadn't put it into words at that time, but I really genuinely believed him. I have to say though that I never went to the gender clinic specifically because my dad never let me, and I hated him for it. But I realized that I'm very lucky that he did not let me go. I was the first boy in my high school, at least to my knowledge, to start identifying as transgender. Between the time I left after 10th grade and the time my class graduated, 1/6 of the boys in my grade identified as transgender, and a similar proportion continued in the grades below me. So in that way, I bear the responsibility as patient zero in my small private high school in a suburb of Boston. And some of these kids medicalized, and there's a degree to which I bear some guilt for that. The reason I feel I have a sense of personal responsibility for sort of spreading this virus is that there's a set of terminology in the transgender community. And one of the terms that is used regularly is the term egg, as an EGG. An egg is somebody who perhaps has not yet realized they are transgender, but is really transgender on the inside. And people in the trans community talk about how they can identify and crack eggs. That process, which you learn how to do on Reddit or in these trans communities, is basically identifying vulnerable kids and convincing them that they are transgender. I did this. I will perhaps offer the only defense that I can in that regard and say that I truly believed that the extent to which I did that, I was doing it because it was good for the people that I convinced were trans. Because I genuinely believed that really inside they were trans, and until they accepted that fact, they would forever live a low quality of life. When I applied to Berkeley, I had to put my pronouns in my application, right? They literally asked for this. It was more clearly systematized where, you were asked your pronouns and the professors were required to respect the pronouns. You walk down a hallway in Berkeley College of Music and you see posters about, oh, we have a trans support group and these are directions on how to get gender affirming care. And all of this just complete bullshit that's encouraging students to harm themselves. And it's like, yeah, it's everywhere. You can't run from it. And then even if you don't go to college, it's in the media and everybody your age is immersed in it. And you walk down the street, like I want to go on a walk and I don't want to be reminded of trans, haha, joke's on you, there's a trans flag. They're everywhere. So the social dynamics of my transgender identification were a driving force. If my peers were not accepting of transgenderism and gender ideology, I doubt I would have done it, genuinely, because it would have been too hard, too impractical. They basically are able to control your thoughts, where you no longer have the language to reason yourself out of the cult. I was stuck there for a while, where I would think about it all of the time, but never make any progress because I got stuck in these ideological loops. Desisting and detransitioning, for that matter, is a multi-step process. I think that when you're in a system where it's overwhelming and it's overwhelmingly supportive, you don't have much impetus for change. But if you are in a system where it's overwhelmingly antagonistic to you, as after I got canceled my first year of college, then you have a major impetus for change. In my freshman seminar, the topic of affirmative action came up, and I said, when it was my turn to talk, of course, that I thought affirmative action was stupid, didn't work, and disproportionately helps white women, and as opposed to the people it's intended to help. My professor asked me to apologize to the class, and I refused, and I failed the class, and I basically got canceled for the first time back then. All of a sudden, all of the goodwill that had been directed toward me in regards to my transgender identity disappeared overnight. One day you're their favorite person, and you're the bee's knees, and they love you so much. And the moment you say something, even if you're trans, if you say something that's against the prevailing orthodoxy, then all of a sudden you're a Nazi. Because you go from the right side of history to Nazi overnight, basically. That support of the transgender identity was removed. And I suppose that laid fertile ground for self-reinvention. By the end of the spring of my first year of college, I got to the point where I was like, you know what? The only real substantive, persistent reason I would have for medically transitioning is because society says I have to do that to be valid, to be trans, to really be a girl or a woman. That's stupid. I'm not going to do that. At that point, I was like, I've been in a cult for years. I realized, yeah, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe these people are wrong. And they obviously don't care about me. So why should I care about them? Why should I conform to the stupid bullshit they're talking about? I'm sick of it. Fuck you. Basically, I had lost all of my friends multiple times. I lost my girlfriend. I had to transfer schools. I lost a sense of safety. What reason would I have to conform to a system which took all of these things from me? That was sort of the last nail in the coffin of my desistance. And by that spring, I was back to really accepting myself as a man. Or more accurately, I was just Simon. It wasn't about being a man. It wasn't about being a boy. It was just, I'm Simon, and part of who I am is male, and I accept that. I harbored a lot of guilt for the extent to which I spread this mimetic virus, the extent to which I convinced people that they were trans. As a result, I started feeling a duty. I was in a position where I knew things, I saw something, which a lot of people weren't talking about. If I chose to talk about this, then I would be able to actually help people not make the same mistakes I did and the people around me did. It's hard to grow up and watch your friends go on cross-sex hormones and meet so many young women who have had double mastectomies that many of them regret or will regret someday, that are unnecessary. They're healthy body parts, and that I got sick of living with myself. I felt like a coward for years. It's not a question of what made you speak up, but a question of why didn't you do it sooner? And my answer for that is I cleaned my room and got my shit together first before I tried to fix the world. There's sort of a broader message for any kid who's struggling with this. You might not believe it right now, but someday you will find people who love you for who you are, not despite, but in part because of your sex. If you're not honest about who you are and honest about your beliefs, you're basically creating this parallel universe. You're choosing to live as this person who doesn't exist, because you're presenting yourself in a way that is understandably inaccurate. And so the people you're going to attract are people who like this false version of you, not people who like you. Ever since I spoke up publicly, the people who have come into my life have liked me for me, and I have been much more secure in these relationships, and they've been far more fulfilling than any of the friendships or relationships that I've had for basically the rest of my life. For the first time in my life, I'm actually happy. Like, I'm actually happy with my life, and that is because I spoke up. I know that right now what I am doing is the best thing that I can be doing to my knowledge. And I think sort of the cherry on top there is I've had a number of parents reach out to me directly or reach out to me through my dad to say that if not for me, their child wouldn't have desisted. And just because that's happened at least one time, that means that me speaking out was worth it. And I could die tomorrow and die a happy man. And I 100% believe that.